Well, good morning and welcome back to the shop. Well, actually, welcome back to the bench. I haven't done any bench work probably for months now. I've been too many other things going on, so I've not really done the bench. But where we're at right now is that in the last video I installed the door seals, and as you know, I don't like the way my door is closing, but I don't want to pass any judgments. Maybe that is how hard it takes, and maybe when you slam a 50-pound piece of metal against the car, it's going to lock. I don't know. Only way I'm going to tell is I got to put the lock on. Now, I took a bunch of pictures of this mechanism when I first took it out, and thank goodness, because I would just recommend to you right now that make sure that when you pull this mechanism out of your car, that don't pull any of the connections apart. If you can leave the connections alone, leave them alone, because these rods are almost the same left or right. They're slightly mirrored. There's going to be a slight angle to the end of this rod to the left, and on the other side there's a slight angle of the rod to the right. And if you put those two rods side by side and you don't mark them, which one's left, which one's right, you can get them mixed up. And if you get them mixed up, then when you install the lock on your car door, that little bit of an angle that compensates for the angle of the door will be off backwards, and that's going to bind and it's not going to work. So, word of advice: even these little rods, mark them, bag them, whatever you want to do, make sure you understand if they're for the passenger or for the driver's side. So now, what have we done? Well, you know I put power locks into this car, and the way I did that, and if you look at my older video, you can understand that I created this bracket out of just some 16 gauge metal, and that bracket I then welded onto the door lock, and that allowed me to mount the lock below the actuator. So this actuator, which again is the key lock, which goes up and down to lock or unlock the door. Sorry, let me get my hands out of the way. I then tied it, and I'm going to show you a video in a few minutes how I did this, but I tied it into this structure so that now the motor can either lock or unlock, the key can lock or unlock, or of course the pull pin can lock or unlock. So those are the three ways to lock or unlock the door. Then you have two other rods. This rod up in here connects to the push button, and that allows you to open the door. So this lifts, and you can see it actuates the control and opens the door. And the same thing with this one as well. It pulls and opens the door. So you have the interior armrest handle, you've got your exterior door, plus you've also got all of the other things. So like I said, you can understand if you mix these rods up with the other side, or get these rods backwards, or even something as simple as, you can see how the rod has been bent here to clear that, and if you don't have that clearance, it's going to bind. So that means it's got to come in from this side. So even if you take these apart, you can really, get that mixed up. So let me show you how I connected this rod to the door lock, and then let's go install it. Let's put the striker in, and let's see how this door closes. Well, as you know, we've added a power lock mechanism, and I simply created a bracket for it, welded it onto the main frame. And this way, what I need to do now is tie this mechanism, which moves, to this mechanism, which again moves, and we have to be able to get it together. Now, the nice thing about this kit is it came with the actuators, and then it also came with these brackets. And what these brackets do is a couple of screws that'll lock this bracket onto the arm, and then another screw will lock the sliding arm onto the bracket. And I can make final adjustments, obviously, but basically make sure it's either up or down, whichever way you want to do it. And if it's, let's say, in the down position, then make sure your motor's in the down position, right? Because this is all down and reset. And then what we can do is we can put the screws in and lock this in place. Now, before I do that, though, I'm just going to grab my marker, because this is too long here. I don't want this extra piece up here. So I'm just going to mark that. Okay, so we've shortened the arm. This is down, this is down. So now I have the actuator connected onto here, what I'm going to do is take a couple of drops of Loctite, because we don't want this coming apart. So just a couple of drops in the threads. And then of course we have the screws. And 3. That's where we're going to tighten it down. Okay, so what we have now is, let's turn the lock. And of course this is the, that door handle in the door, that rod pulls that one. And again, we can't forget about our lock here that unlocks or locks the door. But now you can see the motor is going with it as well. So I can unlock the door by pulling up the knob or pushing down the knob. I can unlock the door by using the key and turning left or right on the key. And then lastly, I can unlock the door using the motor. Okay, so installing this into the car. So I found what I need to do is fold all of the rods so that they're facing lengthwise to the end, because we need to insert this, insert it all the way back. This then goes in, and then we can bring it forward, and then we can twist this up, put this through the end where it's supposed to go, and then start putting the rods up in where they're supposed to end up with. So we take this end, put it in, sorry for the noise. Okay, now that we're in, we can turn this thing sideways, like it's going to be oriented. So here's the mechanisms in the door. I can now do this. We can put the pin through the top. There it goes. The lock now moves towards the end. Put the lock in place. All right, so now the lock is out. I've got obviously there's the rod for the door lock. The other rods are up in here. So again, what I'm going to do is drive the screws in through the end of the lock. Tight, I'm just putting it together so that we can operate the door. There we go. So we've got the rod in place, so that's enough. So we can lock, unlock. If I then lock the pins, they're unlocked. We can then use this to unlock the door. So now at least we have a working door. Again, not electronically and not from the outside, but at least I can just reach in and unlock the car. Let's put the striker in and make some adjustments, and let's see how this door closes. So before I put the striker on, what I wanted to do is I just used some gasket material that I had, and this is really just to protect the paint, because in all honesty, I don't know where this is going to end up. So I just wanted something that I could, make sure that I'm not going to scratch and mark the paint up until it's ready to go. And I can do that by just, loosening it up a bit, putting it back, or at least being in the right area. That's, I guess, the key. Now, the other thing I did is I had bought replacement screws. Now, these replacement screws are, as you can see, they're an Allen key rather than a Phillips. And that was because 2 problems. Number one, getting the old ones out was a real pain because the Phillips is really hard to get it apart. But the biggest problem was that the Phillips heads stripped out really easily, and it was difficult to get them out. And I bought one of those hammer screwdrivers, right, where you place it on and hit with a hammer. But again, they were so seized on that they didn't come off properly. So let's just put this on. So you see what I mean? The gasket allows me now to kind of move this around, and I don't have to worry about scratching the paint up. And this way here we can start to position this properly. But basically, there's nothing I can do here. I'm going to simply put this in a position. I'm going to close the door, eyeball the lock, see that the lock at least is coming even with it. Let's get the up and down. And then once we have the up and down set, we can then either adjust it forward or adjust it back afterwards. But basically, we want this so that when the door closes, it doesn't rest on this. It simply comes around and locks onto this. Okay, so I've adjusted the post one more time, or the striker. So let's give this a try. All right, I still need to come in about a 1/16 of an inch, but let's try this from different perspectives as far as how much effort to lock it. Okay, see, so that obviously is not locking it. Again. that is not a substantial amount of energy, but it does require some energy to engage that second lock. So that means I probably still have a little bit more compression I can do. So I'm going to move the striker in that 1/16 of an inch, and we'll see whether or not that allows me then to pull this door in one last time, and then we're going to be done on that. Okay, so I've moved the striker a little bit further back. All right, actually, I'm okay with that. So the rubber's compressed, but it does stick out a slight bit here. This is actually not flush. This door is sticking away. The reason is this is an aftermarket door, and this door is actually quite flimsy, in all honesty. And that rubber seal along the bottom is probably flexing the door. The door is being held away by the seal. So no matter how far I put this in, that's never going to align. The option I have is, again, see if that breaks in, or I can trim the seal, or some of my subscribers have mentioned there are multiple manufacturers. And although Scott Drake is one of what you would call the, I don't know if you call him a premier manufacturer of replica parts, but his seals are actually very hard. They are an extruded rubber. So other manufacturers make a much lighter seal. So that could be an option, is to change the seals out. Now you'll also notice that I have not yet polished the top part of the door. And that's because I knew I was going to be test fitting the handles and everything, and I thought, well, why would I polish this, test fit, and scratch, and then have to fix it? Why don't I just cut it, do all the pre-tests, because I am going to pre-test all of the handles and make sure everything works, and then I'm going to take it all back off, and then I'll polish. Then I also need to still cut and polish the top rail, but I thought, well, I've still got to put the windows in on this car, so if I'm going to be putting the windows in, why would I do this? Because I need to be able to not worry that I'm going to scratch this, and then if I put the windows in, get that all done, then I will finish cutting and polishing this part of the door. Now, you're going to think to yourself, well, Wally, if you have the window in the way, or in place, won't get in the way. These are the window stops, right? This is the stops that go at the bottom of the door to stop the window from traveling down too far. Do not put these in until the last step. Why? Well, because I want the window to be able to travel further down than it normally should. And the reason I want that window to travel further down than it normally should is because I still need to put in the seals. There's two belt line seals, one on the inside, one on the outside. If this is in the way, that window will stop flush and you can't get those pieces in. But if these stoppers are not in the door, the window will travel down that extra inch, take it below the window, and then you can put the belt line seals in. And then the same thing with the window. After I test this door lock and get the lock in place, I'm going to power up the power locks, make sure that the power lock is able to actuate that. And if that's the case and all of that's good, then time to start installing power windows. Okay, so let's do a test, right? So I've wired the door for the power lock, and that power lock, as you saw, is actuating the button here. So if the button goes down, it's locked. If the button comes up, it's unlocked. So I'm going to turn the key on, and that locks the car, right? So I'm in the car, I start the car, the door is locked, and I drive away. When I arrive at the destination, I simply turn off the car, and the door is unlocked. Now, I can do the exact same thing with my remote. If I press the remote to lock the doors, not only will it lock the doors, it will engage the alarm system. And at the same time, for 30 seconds, it will also turn on the fog lights and the interior lights so that as I'm departing the car, I'll have lights that I can see so I can walk. Then, when I return to the car and I unlock the car, it'll unlock the doors for me. It will also, again, illuminate the fog lights so I can see the car as I approach. It'll also turn the interior lights on so I can see inside the car before I approach the car as well. And that way that's all part of the alarm system and everything. And again, I covered that in previous videos. If you are into that kind of stuff, I suggest you go back and take a look and watch those. I, of course, will be redoing the alarm system and recapping it later when I'm putting the final touches on it. Now, what's the next thing? Next thing is to put the glass in this door. And the reason we want to do all of that is we want this door to be as heavy as it's going to be, and then we'll make the final adjustments to its height, and we'll make the final adjustments to the striker. And the reason we want to do that is we want this to be a weighted door. Now, once the door is weighted down and we get the adjustments and we get the door sitting properly on the striker and also flush with the body, then we'll look and see whether or not we need to change these seals out. As I mentioned earlier, there are different seal manufacturers, and those different seal manufacturers have different densities of that seal, and I might have to go to a lighter density. But until then, hope you enjoyed the video. When I get back, I am going to be installing windows in this car, and again, power windows to make it even more complicated, and hope you enjoy that. But until then, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and I'll see you in a few days.